Good evening, everyone. This is Advocate Nikhil Vadikar. Welcome back to the lecture series that we call as Lockup Lecture Series. Today, we are going to set out on a new discussion on a topic called as the least used provisions of CPC. Please remember, I have taken this topic because though the provisions are the least used provisions, they are much useful. They are the provisions which are used the least. However, they could be used more and more in the interest of the litigants. Let's have a look at that. Let's go through all the provisions. I have listed about 10 provisions of CPC. The first one being Order 12, Rule 6 of CPC, that is a judgment on admission. A very important provision to save the time spent in litigation. The second one, Order 22, Rule 10A, which is the advocate's duty to inform the court about the death of his client, something which very few advocates are aware of. Number 3, Order 26, Rule 10 of CPC, that is procedure of commissioner. Now, the reason why I have taken this particular rule is because there is a lot of confusion among advocates about the procedure to be followed, and there are a few points on which the advocates usually get confused when it comes to the procedure of commissioner. The next one, Order 32, Rule 3A, that is decree against a minor when it can be set aside. Now, there is a particular reason why I have selected this rule. The reason is even a compromise decree can be set aside under this provision. I'll explain a little later how it could be set aside. The next one, Order 36. This is a special case for opinion of the court. This is something which very few advocates are either aware of or have used. I'll explain it later. Number 6, Order 43, Rule 1R. This is Maharashtra Amendment. This deals with appealable interlocutory orders. The next, Section 47, the questions to be determined by the court which executes the decree. Now, there is a latest Supreme Court full bench judgment which deals with this point. That is the reason why I picked up this particular provision. The next, Section 54 of CPC, read with Order 20, Rule 18. Now, this is partition of property assessed to government revenue. We can say partition of agricultural property. Now, the reason why I have selected this provision is particularly the point of delay, which I'll explain. Section 144 of CPC, which is restitution, which is again a point where advocates usually get confused. I'll explain how. And the last one, in Section 16 of Commercial Courts Act, read with the schedule there too. The reason why I have taken this particular provision in this particular topic, which talks about CPC, is because, as you can see in the next column, it amends Order 8, Rule 1 of CPC. There is a time or the time limitation prescribed for filing of threat. Let's get started. Let's have a look at the very first provision. Order 12, Rule 6 of CPC. There is judgment on admission. Let's have a look at the provision itself. Now, this is Order 12, Rule 6, judgment on admission. The rule says, where admission of facts have been made either in the pleadings or otherwise, whether orally or in writing, the court may at any stage of the suit, either on the application of any party or of its own motion, I repeat, either on the application of any party or of its own motion, and without waiting for the determination of any other question between the parties, make such order or give such judgment as it may think fit, having regard to such omission, such admission. Whenever a judgment is pronounced under Subrule 1, a decree shall be drawn up in accordance with the judgment, and the decree shall bear the date on which the judgment was pronounced. Coming back to the point, this is the provision which entitles you to apply to the court for a judgment as soon as you notice an admission of facts being made by the defendant in his written statement. I'm just giving you an example. For example, if he files a suit for recovery of ₹100, if the defendant files his written statement mentioning that the defendant owes only ₹20 to the plaintiff, and the defendant will pay these amounts only if the plaintiff admits them as full and final settlement. Now, this is exactly where you can apply Order 12, Rule 6 and apply to the court seeking an order or seeking a judgment that the amount of ₹20 which is admitted must be paid upfront to the plaintiff without the adjudication of the entire amount, which means that you seek an order saying that the admitted amount must be paid immediately. The remaining amount could be adjudicated later on. You are not giving up your claim for the entire rupees 100. Please remember, the claim sustained. The only thing is that the remaining amount will be adjudicated. It will go into trial. The admitted amount will not be taken into trial. It will be directly paid to you, provided the application gets allowed. Now, if you can see the PPT once again. I'm sorry, if you can, yes, have a look at the extreme right column of this table, the importance of the provision. It leads to a quicker decree, and the party in whose favor judicial admission is made need not wait for the decree until adjudication of the entire suit. You may not wait for the adjudication of the entire suit. Now, I have also mentioned an example. I've also given the example of a case in which I had appeared myself. You can note down if you want. This is writ petition number 871 of 2017 before Bombay High Court. This was K.S. Reddy and Company versus the executive engineer and others. Now, this was a suit which we had filed against the government for recovery of certain amounts. Now, the government, as I told you even earlier, the government filed a written statement stating that the government owes only a smaller amount to the plaintiff, only an amount which is smaller than the amount that was claimed. And the government said that until the plaintiff accepts that amount as full and final settlement, the government will not clear the bills. Now, this is where we immediately took out an application for judgment on admission under Order 12, Rule 6. The trial court initially passed an order against us. The application was rejected on a few grounds. We immediately took the issue before the High Court by filing this writ petition. The Bombay High Court noticed that in a couple of affidavits that the government had filed along with the written statement, the government had categorically admitted the liability, and therefore now the government cannot take a stand that the government will pay the admitted amounts only if they are accepted as full and final payment. No, this stand cannot be taken by the government. The government has to clear the dues which are admitted. The remaining amount will be adjudicated by way of the trial. So in Bombay High Court, we got a favorable order. Now also remember two things. Firstly, I have mentioned here as judicial admission. If you see the third column of importance, I have mentioned that leads to a quicker decree, and the party in whose favor judicial admission is made need not wait for the final adjudication. Now, though I have mentioned as judicial admission, please bear in mind that judicial admission is an admission given in the pleadings of a party. However, the provision, as we have just read out, does not restrict itself to judicial admission. It says that any admission which is written or oral, which is given in pleadings or otherwise. Now, as far as oral admissions are concerned, I may not suggest application of this provision immediately because the courts may not be favorable, may not be in your favor to allow your application. However, as far as admissions given in pleadings, which are written admissions, and admissions given in any other written affidavit are concerned, you can definitely take out an application, and there is a good likelihood that the court will allow this application. The importance is obviously saving the time spent in litigation. Also remember that if the court passes an entire judgment by allowing your application, the judgment is followed by a decree, which is appealable. So if you want to challenge the decree passed by the trial court under Order 12, Rule 6, you cannot file a writ petition. You have to file a first appeal, a regular civil appeal. The reason that we filed a writ petition in Bombay High Court is that because the application filed by us was rejected, there was no detailed judgment. It was a simple order. It was not a detailed judgment. Therefore, we challenged it by way of a writ petition that was entertained by the Bombay High Court because it was not a decree. Therefore, we did not file a regular civil appeal. Now, moving on to the next provision, Order 22, Rule 10A. The advocate's duty to inform the court about the death of his client and the subsistence of the advocate-client contract for this purpose, even after the death of the client. Now, I read out the provision itself. Kindly have a look at the provision. Yes, this is Order 22, Rule 10A. duty of the pleader to communicate to the court death of a party. Whenever a pleader appearing for a party to the suit comes to know of the death of that party, he shall inform the court about it, and the court shall thereupon give notice of such death to the other party. And for this purpose, the contract between the pleader and the deceased party shall be deemed to subsist. Now, as you can see, the reason why I have taken this particular provision is because if you once again have a look at the table that I have made, in the extreme right column, the importance. In an application to set aside the abatement, you can state that the advocate of the deceased party did not inform the death of his client. Please remember, when for example, if your client, if you are the advocate of the plaintiff, if one of the defendants passes away, or if the sole defendant passes away, if the plaintiff for any reason whatsoever is not aware of the death of the defendant, therefore the matter keeps lingering. Now, as per the Limitation Act, you have 90 days time to bring the legal heirs of the deceased defendant on record. After that, you have 60 days the time span to set aside the abatement. So 90 plus 60, total 150 days from the death of the defendant, the suit shall stand abated as against the defendant who is deceased. Now, after the lapse of 150 days, when you take out an application, if your client learns about the death after the lapse of 150 days, when you take out an application to condone the delay, set aside the abatement, and to bring the legal heirs on record with this threefold release, you always have to reason the delay. When you reason the delay in your application, as I mentioned in the last column, the important column, you can always take a ground that though the defendant's advocate was duty bound to inform the court of the defendant's death, though he was duty bound to do so under Order 22 Rule 10A, he did not inform the court, and therefore neither the plaintiff nor the plaintiff's advocate was aware of the death. This is a valid ground. Now, one more point that I must highlight is that this rule, that is Rule 10A, also clarifies that the advocate-client relation, that is the legal contract between the advocate and the client, is subsisting until the death of the client is informed. Please remember, if your client passes away, you are duty bound because the legal contract between you and your client is existing until you inform your client's death to the court. So you're always duty bound to inform the court. This is something which very few advocates are aware of. Advocates usually think that it makes no difference, let's not inform the court. Why to inform something like this to the other party? Let it go. However, you are duty bound. And if the other side's advocate does not inform the court, you can take it as a ground to reason the delay. Moving on to the next provision. Order 26 Rule 10, that is procedure of commissioner. Let's have a look at the provision itself. Yes, that's Order 26 Rule 10 on the screen. The commissioner, after such local inspection as he deems necessary, and after reducing to writing the evidence taken by him, shall return such evidence together with his report in writing signed by him to the court. The report and depositions to be evidence in suit. Now, this is very important. The report of the commissioner and the evidence taken by him, but not the evidence without the report, shall be evidence in the suit and shall form part of the record. But the court, or with the permission of the court, any of the parties to the suit may examine the commissioner personally in open court, touching any of the matters referred to him or mentioned in his report, or as to his report, or as to the manner in which he has made the investigation. Commissioner may be examined in person. Where the court is for any reason dissatisfied with the proceedings of the commissioner, it may direct such further inquiry to be made as it shall think fit. Now, the reason why I have taken I have selected this provision is because many advocates are aware of Order 26 Rule 9, that is appointment of the commissioner. There is a lot of case law on the point how the commissioner is to be appointed, when he is not to be appointed, etc., not to collect the evidence, etc. However, when it comes to the very next rule, that is Rule 10 of Order 26, advocates usually miss out the point, which is Sub-Rule 2, that the evidence which is taken by the commissioner is directly to be read in evidence, which means it is directly admissible in evidence. The chief examination of the court commissioner is absolutely not necessary in the eyes of law. You will find several judgments on this point. The court commissioner's evidence is directly admissible in evidence and a chief examination is not necessary. Only the party or the advocate who does not want to rely or who wants to point out that this commission has not been conducted in the right manner, etc., etc. Only such an advocate can conduct the cross-examination to point out that the evidence is not properly taken, not properly recorded, or is not admissible in evidence. Only cross-examination is to be conducted. The chief examination is not necessary. The evidence goes directly admissible. Now, going on to the next provision, let's have a look at the table once again. The fourth provision, Order 32, Rule 3A. Decree against a minor can be set aside if prejudice has been caused to his interest. Now, let's have a look at the provision itself. That's Order 32, Rule 3A on your screen. Decree against a minor not to be set aside unless prejudice has been caused to his interest. Let me read out the provision first. No decree passed against a minor shall be set aside merely on the ground that the next friend or a guardian for the suit of the minor had an interest in the subject matter of the suit adverse to that of the minor, but the fact that by reason of such adverse interest of the next friend or guardian for the suit, prejudice has been caused to the interest of the minor shall be a ground for setting aside the decree. Nothing in this rule shall preclude the minor from obtaining any relief available under any law by reason of the misconduct or gross negligence on the part of the next friend or guardian for the suit resulting in prejudice to the interest of the minor. Now, the reason why I have selected this particular provision, if you have a look at the table once again, kindly have a look at the extreme right side column, the importance of the provision. Even a compromise decree can be set aside if a minor files a separate suit within 3 years after attaining majority, establishing a case that the decree is prejudicial to his interest. Now, I must highlight 2 points out of this. Firstly, this rule comes as an exception to the general law that a compromise decree cannot be set aside, because the rule says that a compromise decree, as per the rule, a compromise decree passed against a minor can be set aside if the minor makes out a case establishing that his next friend or his guardian who has acted on his behalf has either acted negligently or he has acted in a manner which is prejudicial to his interest. So this is very, very important. So the second point that I must highlight is that if the minor files a separate suit for setting aside a decree, which is a compromise decree which binds him, the minor must file the suit within 3 years of attaining the majority. So you will find several judgments under Article 59 of Limitation Act. This point is covered by Article 59 of Limitation Act, which clearly say that the 3 years limitation would start running only and only after attaining the majority, and therefore the 3 years limitation would expire upon attaining the age of 21 years, which means a suit filed after attaining the age of 21 years is bad in law because the time limitation prescribed by Limitation Act is now lapsed. It has expired. The law assumes that whenever the minor attains majority, he is deemed to or he is assumed to be aware of the transactions entered into or executed by his legal guardian in his favor. A minor cannot come with a ground. He cannot file a suit after completing 25 years. And he cannot take a ground that though I have filed a suit 7 years after attaining the majority, I have done so because I was not aware of the transactions entered into by my legal guardian, by my father or my mother. No. This ground is no more available because the law assumes that he is aware of all the transactions as soon as he attains the majority. Therefore, the cause of action arises or the limitation starts running against the minor upon completion of 18 years and the limitation expires upon completion of 21 years. So this is a very, very important provision of CPC. So moving on to the next provision. Order 36 of CPC. Special case for opinion of the court. Now, the reason I have picked up this particular provision is that this provision is probably the least used provision of CPC. Something which the advocates are not aware of, but every advocate should be aware of. Let's have a look at the provision itself. That's Order 36 on your screen. Special case. Rule 1 says, power to state case for court's opinion. Parties claiming to be interested in the decision of any question of fact or of law may enter into an agreement in writing stating such question in the form of a case for opinion of the court and providing that upon the finding of the court with respect to such question, a sum of money fixed by the parties or to be determined by the court shall be paid by one of the parties to the other of them, or some property, movable or immovable, specified in the agreement shall be delivered by one of the parties to the other of them, or one or more of the parties shall do or refrain from doing some other particular act specified in the agreement. Every case stated under this rule shall be divided into consecutively numbered paragraphs and shall concisely state such facts and specify such documents as may be necessary to enable the court to decide the question raised thereby. Now, this was rule 1. Now let's have a look at, I have skipped rule 2 because there is much procedure, that's not much German right now. Rule 3, agreement to be filed and registered as a suit, very important. The agreement, if framed in accordance with the rules herein before contained, may be filed with an application in the court which would have jurisdiction to entertain a suit. The amount or value of the subject matter of which is the same as the amount of value of the subject matter of the agreement. The application when so filed shall be numbered and registered as a suit between one or more of the parties claiming to be interested in a plaintiff or a defendant. Claiming to be interested, a plaintiff or plaintiffs, and the other or the others of them as defendant or defendant. And notice shall be given to all the parties to the agreement other than the party or parties by whom the application was presented. Now let's have a look at Rule 5. Again, I have skipped Rule 4. There is not much German right now. Rule 5 says, hearing and disposal of a case. The case shall be set down for hearing as a suit instituted in the ordinary manner, and the provisions of this code shall apply to such suit so far as the same are applicable. Where the court is satisfied after examination of the parties or after taking such evidence as it thinks fit that the agreement was duly executed by them, that they have a bona fide interest in the question stated therein, and that the same is fit to be decided, it shall proceed to pronounce the judgment thereon in the same way as in an ordinary suit, and upon the judgment so pronounced, a decree shall follow. Now, the last rule, that is Rule 6. No appeal from a decree passed under Rule 5. No appeal shall lie from a decree passed under Rule 5. Now, this was one of the least used provisions, as I already said. The reason why I selected and the importance of the provision, kindly have a look at the extreme right column of point number 5. The parties to dispute may agree in writing to refer a question of fact or a question of law for opinion of the civil court. Such an agreement, coupled with an application made to the court, is registered and tried as a suit. The decree passed in such a suit is non-appealable. So please try to understand. There are several disputes, especially commercial disputes, in which, whatever experience I have seen that there are a number of parties which are interested in final outcome. There are parties who are not interested in delaying or dragging the matter, because once the parties come to a settlement, they always wish to move on with the same contractual relation which they had earlier. I've seen several parties like this. Now, if your client comes to you and tells you that I'm into so and so business in supply, etc., whatever, I have this dispute with the other party, and I want to put a full stop to the dispute as soon as possible. So you can always advise to your client that you and the other side can enter into an agreement stating a case to the court for its opinion, and specifically pointing out that you abide by the court's jurisdiction, whereby you will honor the judgment as soon as the judgment and decree is passed. If you enter into certain agreement, the decree that will be passed will be non-appealable. Your agreement along with an application filed before the court will be tried and registered as a regular suit. However, the only difference will be that the final decree will have to be abided with without filing any appeal. Now, this is where a lot of time in litigation gets saved. A lot of cost, energy, as well as time is saved. In fact, the business relations can also be restored to their usual normal condition. Therefore, this is a provision which you as the advocate should be aware of so that you can advise your clients. The next one, Order 43 Rule 1R of CPC, that is Maharashtra Amendment. Now, this is appealable interlocutory order. Now, let's have a look at the provision itself. Yes, now that is Order 43 Rule 1R. Now, this is the Maharashtra Amendment. Since you are aware that the 7th schedule of Indian Constitution categorizes different topics of legislation in 3 categories. One is union list, second is state list, and the third is concurrent list. Now, union lists are the topics or the subjects on which only Parliament can enact laws, and the state list is a list of subjects on which only the state legislatures can enact the law. Now, for example, when you go through the Rent Act, may it be Maharashtra Rent Act, or when you go through Maharashtra Land Revenue Code, these are the provisions or these are the enactments which are enacted by your state legislature, the legislature of Maharashtra. However, when you come across an enactment like CPC, it has nationwide application. It is applicable all across the country, and therefore, any amendment made in such a state, any amendment made to any provision of CPC needs the assent of the President. Only after the President assents to such an amendment, that amendment becomes the law applicable only in that particular state. Now, when we see CPC, we have to be very careful and ensure whenever we read the entire section or the rule, we have to read down below to ensure whether there is any amendment made to that particular section or that particular rule in the state of Maharashtra. Now, that is where this particular provision comes in picture. Order 43 Rule 1R is a provision which is amended in Maharashtra. It reads as appeal from orders. An appeal shall lie from the following orders under the provisions of section 104, namely, now I'm directly going to Rule R, an order under Rule 1, Rule 4, Rule 10, and Rule 11 of Order 31. Now, the reason why I selected this particular provision is because if you have a look at the table that I have made once again, we are going to point number 6, the extreme right column. An order passed under Order 39 Rule 11 of CPC, striking off the defense or refusing to strike off the defense is appealable. Therefore, there is no necessity to approach the High Court by way of a writ petition. Now, this is where several advocates commit a mistake. Now, let me elaborate once again. Order 39 Rule 11. Order 39 Rule 11 itself is a provision which comes by way of an amendment in Maharashtra. CPC has only 10 rules in Order 39. However, Maharashtra has 11 rules in Order 39. The 11th rule deals with striking off the defense if the defendant violates any order passed by the court. If you notice such a violation, if you are the plaintiff and you notice such a violation, you can apply to the court for striking off the defense. If the court notices or if the court feels that there is willful violation of the particular order of the court can allow your application and and strike off the defense. The court may also reject your application if the court feels that there is no willful default. The court also has the power to reject your application and not to strike off the defense. Now, the order may be passed either allowing your application or rejecting your application. In both the cases, the order becomes an appealable order under Order 43 Rule 1R. And therefore, if the trial court passes an order, you have to file an appeal from order in the district court, or what you call as a miscellaneous civil appeal. However, a direct writ petition filed in Bombay High Court or filed in the High Court will not be entertained by the court because the provision is appealable, and therefore please bear in mind to advise your clients not to approach the High Court directly. This is a common mistake committed by many advocates, whereby the time spent in prosecuting the writ petition is a complete waste of time. Your client keeps expecting an order as soon as possible. However, in Bombay High Court, it may take a very long time to get a matter listed. Something which is not urgent may get listed after 6 months, 8 months, or even 1 year, at the end of which the court may tell you to withdraw your writ petition because the order is appealable and to go back to the district court. Therefore, please bear in mind, Order 39 Rule 11 is an appealable order. Now, going back to the table that I have made, the next provision. We are now on point number 7, that is section 47 of CPC. Questions to be determined by the court which executes the decree. Now, the reason why I have taken, if you see the extreme right column, though the executing court cannot re-adjudicate any issue decided in the suit, it can certainly re-adjudicate the issue whether the decree is passed without jurisdiction, and can refuse to execute the decree if it is found to be without jurisdiction. Now, the reason why I have taken out this particular provision is because there are many advocates, as I said, who are not aware that the executing court, though as a general rule, cannot go behind the decree to re-adjudicate any issue which is adjudicated already in the suit. There is an exception which is now settled by a catena of Supreme Court judgment. The exception which says that the executing court can definitely re-adjudicate the point whether the decree is passed without jurisdiction. If the court finds that the decree is passed without jurisdiction, the court may clearly hold it in favor of the judgment debtor, and the court can allow your application, saying that yes, this decree is without any jurisdiction, and the court may reject the application of the decree holder to execute the decree. Now, kindly have a look at two important judgments of the Supreme Court on the extreme right column. First is AIR 1977 Supreme Court, page 1201. There is Sundar Das versus Ram Prakash. You may note down this particular judgment. This was subsequently followed by many more judgments. The second one is latest judgment of Supreme Court full bench. There is AIR 2017 Supreme Court, page 5852. This is Harpal Singh versus Ashok Kumar and others. Now, these two judgments are of extreme importance when it comes to section 47 of CPC, that is execution of a decree. Moving on to the next provision. Section 54 read with Order 20 Rule 18 of CPC. Partition of property assessed to government revenue. Now, when we talk about the partition of properties assessed to government revenue, we may say that this deals with the partition of agricultural property. Now, the reason why I have taken this particular provision, now let's have a look at the provision itself. Section 54, partition of estates or separation of share, where the decree is for the partition of an undivided estate assessed to the payment of revenue to the government, or for the separate possession of a share of such an estate. The partition of the estate or the separation of the share shall be made by the collector or any gazetted subordinate of the collector deputed by him in this behalf, in accordance with the law, if any, for the time being in force, relating to the partition or the separate possession of share of such estate. Now, going to Order 20 Rule 18. Decree suit for partition of property or separate possession of a share therein, where the court passes a decree for the partition of property or for the separate possession of a share therein, then if and insofar as the decree relates to an estate assessed to the payment of revenue to the government, the decree shall declare the rights of several parties interested in the property, but shall direct such partition or separation to be made by the collector or any gazetted subordinate of the collector deputed by him in this behalf, in accordance with such declaration and with the provisions of section 54. If and insofar as such decree relates to any other immovable property or to movable property, the court may, if the partition or separation cannot be conveniently made without further inquiry, pass a preliminary decree declaring the rights of the several parties interested in the property and giving such further directions as may be required. Now we are dealing particularly with sub-rule 1. Now let's try to understand the reason why I have taken this particular point. Yes. Now if you go to point number 8 of my table, the last column. After preliminary partition decree of the agricultural property, the court is duty bound to send a decree to the collector. Please remember. Now many advocates feel that you have to file an application under section 54 or under order 20 rule 18 of CPC. Order 20 deals with decree. However, you are not duty bound as a litigant to file an application requesting the court to send a decree to the collector. It is the duty of the court to send a decree to the collector. An application filed by the decree holder requesting the court to send a decree to the collector is not governed by the law of limitation, since the said application is only a reminder to the court and not a duty of the litigant. Now, this is where several advocates commit a mistake. Several advocates are of the view that since this is an application filed if you get a decree of partition, after some time, for say after say 4 years, your advocate notices that nothing has happened, and the advocate files an application under order 20 rule 18 requesting the court to send a decree to the collector. The other side, the judgment debtor or any other advocate, may usually take a defense saying that this is an application which is governed by Article 137 of Limitation Act, because this is not governed by any other article, and therefore this is governed by the residuary article, and therefore since it is filed after the lapse of 3 years, since it is filed, for example, after 4 years, your time limitation has already lapsed or has already expired, and therefore this application is no more maintainable. However, please remember that this is completely incorrect application of law, because the law says that the court is duty bound, and therefore the litigant or the litigant's advocate is not at all duty bound to file such an application. You will see several judgments on this point which hold that such an application is not governed by the law of limitation, because this is not the duty of the litigant at all. This is only a reminder to the court to send that particular decree to the collector for the further process. So moving on to the next provision. Section 144 of CPC, that is restitution. Now we are not talking about the restitution of conjugal rights. We are talking about restoration of status quo ante. So what is this provision? Let's have a look at the provision itself. Section 144. Now this is a lengthy section. I just read whatever is necessary. Where and insofar as a decree or an order is varied or reversed in any appeal, revision, or other proceeding, or is set aside or modified in any suit instituted for the purpose, the court which passed the decree or order shall, on the application of any party entitled to any benefit by way of restitution or otherwise, cause such restitution to be made, as will, so far as may be, place the parties in the position which they would have occupied but for such decree or order, or such part thereof as has been varied, reversed, set aside, or modified, and for this purpose the court may make any orders, including orders for the refund of cost and for the payment of interest, damages, compensation, and mean profits, which are properly consequential on such variation, reversal, setting aside, or modification of the decree or order. Now, the reason why I've taken out this particular provision is that if you have a look at the table once again, point number 9, kindly have a look at the last column. Execution of a decree against you does not make your appeal infructuous. Please remember. For example, let's take an example of a suit of specific performance. You are defendant in a suit for specific performance. The suit gets decreed, which means that you are facing the decree of specific performance. After that, you as a defendant prefer a regular civil appeal. When you file a regular civil appeal, the respondent, that is the original plaintiff, comes with the argument that during the course of or during the pendency of the appeal, the decree is already executed. Now, this may happen for a number of reasons. If there is any delay in filing the appeal itself, there may be several reasons. The advocate appearing for the defendant in the trial court was not aware, etc., etc., or the advocate did not inform the client. There could be a number of reasons for which the decree gets executed against you till you prosecute the appeal. Now, in your appeal, when the respondent, that is the original plaintiff, comes with the argument that the decree is already executed and therefore your appeal has become infructuous, please remember that your appeal has not become infructuous, because under section 144 of CPC, you are entitled to get the status quo ante restored, to get the restitution, which means that you can prosecute the entire appeal even if the sale deed has been executed through the court commissioner. Even if the decree of specific performance or any other decree has been executed, you can still prosecute the appeal. And if your appeal gets allowed, you can file a separate application for restitution. If the appeal is allowed, the court will restitute the status quo ante and will put you back in the situation in which you would have been if the original decree would not have been passed. Which means, for example, in the case of specific performance, if the court commissioner has already executed a sale deed in favor of the plaintiff, that sale deed will be set aside. Now, I'm just giving you one of the examples. I have mentioned it here. You can note down if you want. Appeal from order number 43 of 2016 before Bombay High Court. This was a case Vijaya Sanjay Pawar versus Bhimrao Jnanu Pawar. So this was a matter in which I had appeared myself. This was a judgment of Justice Mridula Bhatkar. She had very well reasoned the reasoning for the judgment, and section 144 has been quoted and has been beautifully analyzed. You may go through this judgment. This is something which is of utmost importance because several advocates get confused on the point that if the decree has been executed, the appeal becomes infructuous. No, the appeal may not necessarily get infructuous. Your right to prosecute the appeal is still exists. So moving on to the last provision. Section 16 of Commercial Courts Act, read with the schedule thereto. Now, you may be surprised why I have taken the provision in Commercial Courts Act in my discussion of CPC. If you look at the next column, it reads Amendment to Order 8 Rule 1 of CPC applicable to commercial suits. Section 16 talks about amendments to CPC when it comes to a particular provisions of CPC. Now let's have a look at section 16 of Commercial Courts Act. This is section 16 of Commercial Courts Act. Amendments to the Code of Civil Procedure in its application to commercial disputes. The provisions of Code of Civil Procedure shall, in their application to any suit in respect of a commercial dispute of a specified value, stand amended in the manner as specified in the schedule. The commercial division and commercial court shall follow the provisions of CPC as amended by this Act in the trial of a suit in respect of a commercial dispute of a specified value. Where any provision of any rule of the jurisdictional high court or any amendment to the CPC by the state government is in conflict with the provisions of CPC as amended by this Act, the provisions of CPC as amended by this Act shall prevail. Now, as I told you earlier, CPC gets amended in each state. Now, we also have several amendments in Bombay, I would say Bombay amendments or Maharashtra amendments, whatever you call them. We have several amendments applicable in the state of Maharashtra. Now, one of them is an amendment to Order 8 Rule 1. However, Order 8 Rule 1 stands amended by application of section 16 of Commercial Courts Act. Now, let's have a look at the amendment. For that purpose, you have to see the schedule. This is a schedule to the Commercial Courts Act. In Order 8, in Rule 1, for the proviso, the following proviso shall be substituted, namely, provided that where the defendant fails to file the written statement within the set period of 30 days, he shall be allowed to file the written statement on such other day as may be specified by the court for reasons to be recorded in writing and on payment of such costs as the court deems fit, but which shall not be later than 120 days from the date of service of summons, and on expiry of 120 days from the date of service of summons, the defendant shall forfeit the right to file the written statement, and the court shall not allow the written statement to be taken on record. Now, if we compare this to the Order 8 Rule 1 applicable within the state of Maharashtra, it's there on your screen. Maharashtra Amendment, written statement. The defendant may, and if so required by the court, shall, within such time as may be specified in that behalf, or within such extended time as the court may permit, present a written statement of his defense after serving a copy thereof on the plaintiff or his pleader on or before the date fixed for presenting the same in the court, or file in court for the use of the plaintiff a copy of the written statement while presenting the same in the court, provided that the first adjournment for filing the written statement shall not ordinarily exceed 4 weeks, and no further adjournment shall be granted except for reasons to be recorded in writing. So in Maharashtra Amendment, the court has the power to record the reasons and to condone the delay if there is any delay for a valid reason in filing the written statement. However, if we come back to the amendment as per the schedule and as per section 16 of Commercial Codes Act, the time limit prescribed for filing the written statement as per Order 8 Rule 1 which stands amended. The time limit is only 120 days from the date of service of summons. As we read section 16, it specifically says, if you go to subsection 2 once again, if you go to the subsection 3, where any provision of any rule of the jurisdiction High Court or any amendment to CPC by the state government is in conflict, the provisions of CPC as amended by this action. So therefore, what prevails is the provision of 120 days limitation and not the provision which is applicable by way of Maharashtra Amendment. Now, this is where several advocates have been committing mistakes. Therefore, this is the last provision that I wanted to highlight and I wanted to inform the advocates about. Now, this was a discussion about the least used provisions of CPC. I always feel that these are the provisions which should be discussed more, which should be studied more, and which should be understood more. They should also be applied more. This is always in the interest of litigants and also in the interest of advocates if the advocates study CPC more and more in depth. That's all from me. If you found this lecture useful, please let me know. Thank you so much.